and from, as he put it, his boring life over many decades.
Boring life over many decades, right?
So, he's a longtime resident of Sanibel and a beloved member of St. Michael's. So Phil, please tell us a little bit about your personal history. I think there's a Chicago in your background, and your T-shirt says something about Falmouth, and your license plate used to say that. So that's a big piece of country. So tell us about it.
Okay. I was born in Evanston, Illinois, which is a suburb immediately north of Chicago. I was going to be named after my uncle Philip Paul, who served in World War One. He was gassed. He lived, but he died before I was born. Fortunately, I had a very good godmother, and she said, "It's going to be bad enough with this boy going through life with the initials PU, but I will not have him going through life named PP Urion." So I had a middle name change to Alan, and so I was not PP Urion. Although I had a lot of nicknames, as you can well imagine, growing up.
I guess.
What? It's been a while.
I know that. Yeah, have a seat over there.
So he's got a seat there.
That's right.
Our home was in Wilmette, Illinois, and which my father had built. It was a replica of my mother's house in Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire. And the Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire house was built in 1776. So this was a New England house in the middle of the flatlands of the Midwest.
But it did have plumbing.
It did have plumbing.
Okay.
Actually, the first floor had 7-foot ceilings, which was extremely unusual. And that's because my mother and father gave the planning commissioner of Wilmette a spaghetti dinner with a lot of wine. And so at the end of the dinner, they showed him these things. He said, "Doesn't this look pretty?" He said, "Well, just put your initials on the bottom of each of these things." And he did not notice that it was totally out of code. Anyhow, that was interesting. My father was a lawyer, and I had 2 older brothers, Paul, name runs in our family, and my brother Kimball. My mother died when I was 3, and I was taken care of by her mother, Ida Louise, which was, I was supposed to be a lady. That was gonna be my name in life, but fortunately, I didn't have that name. I called my grandmother Gaga, and so we divided our time between Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire, and this house I just described, and Winter Park, Florida. In Winter Park, they said, "You talk funny," which I did. And Fitzwilliam, I attended a 1-room schoolhouse, which was a marvelous education. And it's a system, unfortunately, that no longer exists. But what it did was, it had absolute discipline, and first graders finished their lesson with the teacher. Everyone had to be absolutely quiet. Then she did the second grade, and you could follow that. Then the 3rd grade, then they started talking about multiplication and long division, and so then you said, forget that, and you went back to reading what you should have in the first place. Gaga died when I was 6 years old, when she was reading to me in Winter Park, Florida. And so my father had to reconnoiter, and so he arranged for my brother Kim and I to be taken care of by a widow of one of his law partners in the house in Wilmette. So we lived there with this lady that we called Aunt Ruth. She was not an aunt at all, but she took care of me. She had remarried, but she had 4 children, and we all got along extremely well. My father remarried, and he moved his practice from Chicago to New York. He had befriended a tough Irish kid at Dartmouth College by the name of Basil O'Connor. And Basil had a law firm that was originally called Roosevelt, O'Connor and Farber. Roosevelt got another job, first in New York State and then in Washington DC. So my father wound up doing a lot of personal work for Franklin D. Roosevelt when he moved to New York. After a few years, they decided to reconvene, both families. My stepmother had 3 children. My father had 3 children, so he bought a house in Harrison, New York, that was owned at that time by the bank because a lot of things had gone into bankruptcy. And it was an interesting house. It was built on land owned by a man by the name of Sterling, who gave a lot of money to Yale Law School, and he gave an acre every year of his property in Harrison to the architectural school, and they were to design a particular style of house, and he would have it built, and the money would go to Yale. And ours was an English Tudor house, so we had room for five boys. There was my brother Paul, who was 10 years older than I, my brother Kim. My stepbrother Jim was my brother Paul's age, and I had a stepbrother Tom who was my age. The third stepchild or step sibling was Dorothy, and she had remarried at a young age and did not join us there. So we went to a grammar school in Rye, New York, which was the next town, because my father thought we would get a better education with this superintendent who was Pop Flores, the tough Portuguese guy who took no prisoners. But we got a good education. And my father was instrumental in starting a band at that school. And so I took up an instrument, my stepbrother Tom took up an instrument, and mine was the mellophone that eventually morphed into the French horn. So then we went to a prep school in Vermont called Vermont Academy. And at this point, the war was on, and my 3 older brothers were all in the service. My brother Kim was in the Navy Air Corps, and he was ferrying planes, Hellcats from the Grumman factory in Long Island to San Diego. And he told my stepmother one time that if anything happens to my plane, I'm going to make sure that it doesn't kill any civilians, because some of them did that when they were transporting. It was a shakedown flight for the plane, as well as moving it to the West Coast. Unfortunately, he did have a problem with his plane and he, died as a result of crash because he, jumped out, I think, too late. Anyhow, so that was in my junior year at Vermont Academy. We graduated and my stepbrother and I, we both attended Vermont Academy. We went in, we each went into the Navy. I had taken a test, beforehand that qualified me to go into radar training in the Navy. So I went in as a seaman first class, which was the equivalent to an Army corporal. So I wasn't on the bottom of the list, I was one notch up. And I never, I never got radar training and I never got sea duty. I was stationed stateside all the time I was in the Navy. We got out of the Navy and Tom and I decided while we were waiting to go to college, we would have a dance band. So we had a 14-member dance band and some of our members were very good musicians. They've been in the service bands, and the service bands had just some great charts, which fortunately, a lot of these guys just took with them. So we had a wonderful book to play at basically local country clubs in Westchester County, New York, as well as a venue called Playland. And we did that for 6 months until we were accepted to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. So we went to Evanston. I went to the journalism school there, got a bachelor of degree in journalism, went to work for Life magazine. After that, Life had two of their best photographers, Carl Mydans and David Douglas Dunklin, in this far off country called Korea. And I said to the lady who was training me, I said, why is Mr. Luce sending our two best photographers to this, where was this place again? And she said, Mr. Luce smells of war. Mr. Luce was right. Life had the only two photographers for the first 2 months of the Korean War. That was an interesting, an exciting time for someone interested in news and seeing photos that were, many of them were not published before they were even published in the magazine. I decided in September to go back and get a master's degree at Northwestern, which I did. The graduation the following June, I married this very lovely lady I'd been dating, who originally came from New Orleans. Went to work for Procter and Gamble in what they call their editorial department in the manufacturing thing. We did the company magazine, recruiting materials, what have you. Then I got a job at Modern Packaging Magazine, which is a trade magazine in Chicago. I was the Midwest editor and covered all the big packaging news from the Alleghenies to the West Coast. I was recruited to be the public relations director of Booz Allen and Hamilton, a management consulting firm. And then after, while I was at Booz Allen, my father committed suicide. So there's been a lot of discussions in my family, about that. Anyhow, I was raising two wonderful children, my son David, my daughter Claire. And, then, I decided to hang out my own shingle, in public relations to serve, professional, firms like management consultants, executive recruiters, engineers, architects, interior designers, what have you. During that time, my wife was diagnosed with cancer, and, so, we had, 10 good years before, she, died. I, subsequently, married, a widow. We known, she and her husband, actually had a place in Sanibel, Florida. And we came down just before, he died. We came down to visit him. He died in May and my wife died in the following August. So the two families knew each other, and, she, due to my daughter came out to, help clear out my wife's personal effects. And, so I wanted to take her and her husband, to dinner, and she came out with her two young babies. And, so I called Jan and I said, you said if I ever need any help, give a call. I need a babysitter and I can't find one. She said, I've got one. I said, good, give me your name and, I'll contact her right away. She said, you're talking to her. I said, really? And so she took care of them. My two grandchildren, did not go to sleep at all. I mean, she had a terrible time with them. Anyhow, I didn't ask her, how much do you charge now? Is it 25 cents an hour or 50 cents? So I took her to dinner, at a, private club we both belong to, eating club. And, all of her friends came by and said, well, hi, Jim. So,
What's going on?
we couldn't say this is a payoff for babysitting, so anyhow, that, obviously morphed into something, better than that, and so we did marry. And, the two families knew each other, and, she had four children, and, they're still speaking to me to this day.
This was in Chicago or just still in New York?
This was in Chicago.
Chicago, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Then we decided, we would sell both of our houses in Chicago and divide our time between, Cape Cod and her, little unit, condo down here in Sanibel, which we did. And, so, while we were in Cape Cod, one summer she discovered that, she had, breast cancer. And, so, she was, treated, but, subsequently, died. So I was down here in Sanibel and my neighbor called me up and I was a member of the power squadron down here. And, she said, would you like to be a mentor in the power squadron? I said, what's a mentor in the power squadron? I've been in the power squadron a long time. I have no idea what that is. She said, well, Scott and I are, run the new members committee and we, the new members coming into the power squadron, is like, going into an Episcopal, church. No one pays any attention to you if you're new. So we gotta change that. She obviously did not feel that way about this church. So, I did, and, she said, we don't know if this lady is married or not, but she seems very nice. So, there's a lady from, Captiva, named Stella Farwell, one thing led to another, and I married Stella. And, she, later, we love to travel, and we did a lot of traveling. And, so, we discovered that she had, ovarian cancer, and, so she, fought that for 2 years and then succumbed, so. When I first met, Bill Van Hoss, I said, Bill, I can sum up my life in 5 words, but the 5 words are critical, on what your opinion of me is gonna be. So we'll try me, and I said, okay, I've been married 3 times. And I said, you got a serial lecture here, right? So I said, I've been widowed 3 times, and so he said, oh, and I said, well, I feel very fortunate to have found 3 women to love me, so. That's the quick summary of my life.
So that's what got you here to Sanibel.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the,
right,
I mean, it's very interesting how,
yeah.
so did you just choose to go to Cape Cod, or did you have some connection there, or?
My second wife, Jan, grew up in Marblehead, Massachusetts,
Okay,
and her parents had a summer place in Cape Cod. It was in Chatham, which is the elbow of Cape Cod.
yeah,
And so we came and we liked Cape Cod. She obviously loved Cape Cod. So I decided that was a long way out on for if we're gonna spend our summers there. So we found a place in Falmouth, which is, I describe Falmouth as the armpit of Cape Cod. None of my friends like that at all. Anyhow, so we had a condo in Falmouth, Massachusetts, and so we divided our time between Falmouth
that's how you
and
got-
Sanibel.
Yeah, right
said-
next to a place called Woods Hole.
That is exactly right. That's Woods Hole, you know, Falmouth is, I forget what they call them, but there are villages within towns. There's the town of Falmouth and village of Woods Hole, East Falmouth, West Falmouth.
North Falmouth.
Yeah, and a couple of others, I think. So anyhow, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I lived in 2 of them. I lived in Woods Hole and I lived in North Falmouth.
I know that. And I had a friend, John at NOAA, he ran the fisheries department at NOAA in Woods Hole. And one day I introduced him to Dr. Mercolano. And he took me aside and he said, don't ever do that again. He said, every other person walking down the street in Woods Hole is a PhD. He said, don't do that again. And but it was interesting, and I have a granddaughter that lives in Woods Hole right now. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
You know, the Chrysler's son-in-law, he worked in Woods Hole.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he
It
worked
was-
at the lab.
It was interesting, yeah.
You said this was your boring life.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound boring at all.
You said you and your wife like to travel. Well, where are some of the places you've traveled?
I know you're gonna ask that question. I count up, I've been to, well, when my first wife died, was diagnosed with cancer, we started traveling as much as we could. But I've been to 30 countries plus Antarctica. And I just read someone's obit, and he'd been to 100 countries and so on.
You better get going, man.
And this, but, I like to, there was several countries I like to return to, which I did. Yes.
Which are your favorites?
Italy is my favorite. I, had a, cousin who, married, an Italian from, Florence, which was a very romantic story, which we don't have time for, but anyhow, I've visited them, several times, and, his English was, absolutely wonderful. He was a buyer for, Macy's and, Nordstrom and a couple of other, companies in the United States. So, he, showed us around Florence and the environs, yeah.
When did you first come to St. Louis?
Excuse me, Phil, that's been interesting. I'll pick up the rest later.
It's being recorded, so you can.
Oh, that's right.
We came to, St. Michael's in 1989. And, my wife Jan and I, looked around at the congregation and we said, you know, if they ever start a youth group, I think we're going to be automatically appointed head of the youth group. So, but, it's become, much more diversified age-wise since then, so.
Okay. So who were the greatest influences on your life? I know you had a number of them, but any couple stand out?
I have, you're not supposed to have a favorite brother, but my brother Kim was my favorite brother. So he had a, great influence, and, I did most of my growing up with him. I had a boss who was one of the, smartest men I ever knew, at Booz Allen and Hamilton. And, he was a great influence. And, I did, a trip to the Holy Land with an Episcopal priest by the name of Terry Fulham. He came to our church several other times, but, Terry was a, dynamic, leader. And I was on his 43rd trip to the Holy Land, so he had guides there that he'd used a lot. And so we were in Chicago, this is my second wife and I, we're going to go on this trip one summer, and we read about disturbances. And so I called him up and I said, you know, Reverend Fulham, we're having second thoughts about going to the Holy Land. He said, you two live in the Chicago area, don't you? I said, yes. He said, do you go down to 31st and Roosevelt at 2 o'clock in the morning by yourself, walking down the street? I said, are you kidding? He said, we don't go to those areas either. He said, there are two groups that, do not want anything to happen to American tourists. One is the Israeli government, and the other are the Palestinians. They are getting money from the federal government, and they don't want anything to happen at all. So it was a fabulous trip.
Well, Jerry and Ruth were amazing people.
You knew them? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was, he was a wonderful musician. When he was ordained, I think he told his bishop he was gonna teach music, and he wasn't ever gonna have a church, and then he had a church, and in Darien, Connecticut, that grew from a couple of hundred to over 1,000 up there, you know,
Yeah, quite a bit over 1,000, couple thousand.
a couple of thousand, yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
So have you been a lifelong Episcopalian?
I would say, I guess so, as a, when we moved to Harrison, New York, the local population there was, Irish and Italian. And so we have, a huge Roman Catholic population. And, they, Catholic Church had a school, but most of the kids went to public school. So the priest somehow convinced the, school system that, every Wednesday, the students should have a choice of going to either study hall all afternoon or going to, a church of their choice. And, so he had names for his people. He knew what his thing was going to be. So, we got this ultimatum, and so we said, well, you know, the Episcopal Church is kind of close to the house. So my stepbrother Tom and I opted to go to the Episcopal Church. And, somehow there were no girls, there was 6 or 8 boys. And, this priest was good. I remember one of the opening things we're gonna talk about the, apostles. He said, what do you think of the apostles? And one of us said, well, they're ignorant fishermen, superstitious, so they would believe anything. He said, oh, that's good, guys. Well, you're right, most of them were fishermen. He said, have any of you guys done fishing? No. He said, well, let me ask, if you see birds flying around, well, what does that mean? If there's like a mackerel sky there, do you stay out in the water? How much should you charge for your fish? You know, they had to make a living. So, well, they knew their business. They weren't all dumb then. And, so he would cleverly peck away at your, arguments or your prejudice and, you know, realize that, commercial fishing is a tough life and you gotta be pretty darn smart to succeed, and they weren't. So anyhow, so that was a, my really first, introduction to the Episcopal Church. And, the,
Bill, given your marital history, how did you approach your second or your third wife? Did she have reservations?
she was actually, it was kind of the other way around. She was younger than I was by, well, let's see, by 10 years. So she wanted to know what my health was. And so the first time she said, do you walk? And I said, oh yeah, I walk. And, so she said, well, meet me at, the, lazy flamingo, right up by Captiva. And, so we started walking, and I'm thinking, the further we walk, we have to walk back. So I'm conserving my breath, and she's asking questions, yeah, no. And, the lady who sort of set me up with this thing said, don't tell her how old you are. Don't tell her how old you are. So the fourth question was, how old are you? So I'm totally honest and just bum, bum, bum. But I did make it back and, so, but, yeah, it was interesting. It was sort of the reverse,
Yeah.
yeah, in that particular instance.
At what point in your, okay, very interesting about how that priest kind of picked away at your prejudice about fishermen. But at what point, did you just grow in your faith then as you kept attending there? You adopted the faith or, well, when did you become I guess, more than, that was a very adolescent perspective that you had, and rightly so. So how did that grow?
There are, a lot of people who become Christians that, have the Paul experience. They're knocked off their horse and boom. I've never had an experience like that. I keep inching my, way along. I did have, an experience when my, first wife was diagnosed with, cancer. Had a session, with the surgeon, just the two of us. And he said, you probably have 10 years of life left, with the two of you. He said, so my advice to you is to make the most of it. And I said, okay. So we did a lot of, traveling because she loved to travel and, so we tried to make the most of it, but I went back to my car, in the church, in the hospital parking lot. And, I must have looked awful, and so this guy's going by me and he said, gee, it can't be that bad. Which is kind of a stupid thing to say in a hospital parking lot because you don't know what that person has experienced. And, so I, got into my car and, it was, a moment that, was an extremely low spot for me. And I felt this presence, and a voice said, you're going to be all right. And, I think that was the Lord talking to me.
So you did have a Paul experience. Didn't knock you off your horse, but.
No, but, I said, well, was that real or not real or anyhow, but, so I've always felt supported. After that and anything I've encountered. So,
But that must have been then a real challenge when the next wife also developed severe health issues.
Yeah. And, she, Jan's, also had breast cancer and, hers went, a little faster. So
On the bright side, you must have a large network of stepchildren and children
I do.
and grandchildren.
I do, and they all speak with me.
That's,
So that's great.
how many?
I have two, David and Claire, and then I have, four, Jan had four, when, Hurricane Ian came Jan's youngest daughter, moved to Sarasota. So I spent, about 4 or 5 months, with Pam in Sarasota. She pops down and visits frequently. And then, Stella had, two children. I had two children. One is building a home, Trey's building a home in, a little island off of Juneau, Alaska. And, he, had created a roadable airplane, that, flew and, this, that, and the other thing, but he did not wanna, make a commercial product out of it because he was worried about liability and insurance and all that kind of stuff, so. And the, daughter had a whitewater rafting, business in, North Carolina. If you ever wanna go whitewater rafting, I've got the place to recommend.
And we've been there at your suggestion. Why didn't my daughter and her
Oh, good.
son-in-law had been there.
Oh,
Yeah.
good, good,
It's a
good.
great, fun place.
Oh, it is, yeah, 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 so,
Well, so that is indeed a network.
yeah. Well, interesting, when I, married Jan, her oldest daughter actually took care of the Sunday school kindergartners. And my daughter was in this high schoolers class. So they knew each other from kindergarten age up, the two things. It was interesting when I, proposed to Jan, she had 3 daughters and a son. And the son was living at home, so he knew me. And, the oldest daughter flew for, at that time, TWA. She said, Janice, has a layover here in Chicago. And I said, well, I thought she lived in San Francisco and just flew out of New York City on international flights. Well, but there's a layover here. And okay, so she checked me out. And then, she said, daughter Pam is, has a, sales meeting and, she'll be here, boom, boom, boom. And so I said, when's Chrissy coming to check me out? That was the third term. It was a matter of fact, she's, boom, boom, boom.
As a matter of fact.
They, all seem, I passed muster.
Passed the test.
Yeah, I passed the test, yeah. So, yeah,
Well, I think the fact that you have a relationship with this extended family, which isn't biologically yours, I think is a great testament to you, your influence, I don't know, you just must be a man of love or something that they.
well, my, youngest, sister-in-law, I think it was a couple of years ago, asked me a question, I forgot what it was, but how do you keep your equanimity or boom, 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 how, and to answer your question. So I gave that a lot of thought. And, I realized that growing up, I had the love of a lot of women. I'm sure my mother loved me very much before she died. My grandmother loved me. This Aunt Ruth, who took care of me, loved me. When my father remarried, and she found out that my, brother Kim and I would leave their house and go to New York, she asked my father, I'd like to keep Phil here for a few more years. So she wanted to, she did not want me to, leave, and, I've had 3 wives that have, loved me, that, or they faked it very, very, very well. So I feel, given me a huge amount of support. Made a big difference, you know.
Wow. Thank you for sharing.
Um, well, just, is there any, you've already given us subtly, I think, a lot of advice, but as probably the honored senior citizen among us, any advice that you, or more probably perhaps any observations you'd like to share? Because of all these other things you've been through, now you've been through a major hurricane, which destroyed your house.
Yeah.
And that was just another little bit of excitement, and, who said God doesn't have a sense of humor?
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
I've heard people over the years, giving advice, what do you, feel, boom, 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 this, that, and the other thing, and, I listen to them and I think, you're pontificating and you like to hear yourself talk. And, I think everyone's life is, different. I mean, the Lord made us all unique. So what has worked for me may not work for you. And everyone's circumstances are totally unique. And, so I've hesitated, giving, advice. And I've had a lot of opinions on, what, people should do or something like that.
Sure.
I've kept them, I've pretty much decided, keep opinions to myself, and I really have a hard time, giving advice. I think, I'd like everyone to have a strong faith, but, what I would wish for and what the individual will embrace are two totally different things. But,
Appreciate your
it's
wisdom.
worked for me, but, when people say, and sometimes children or grandchildren, say, how did you manage? I said, because, the Lord has helped me at every step of the way. So, I'll share my faith, that way. But, some listen, some don't.
Bill, how many Episcopal churches have you gone to? Do you know?
Oh, probably not as many as, a lot of other people have. Let's see. One, I was the one in Harrison, married in Episcopal Church in Highland Park, Illinois. Oh, and, at Northwestern, when I was dating my wife, we, went to, Northwestern, Evanston had, I think, 3 Episcopal churches. We went to 2 of them. And, so, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 6 or 8, something like that. Not that many different ones.
Any other questions from anybody that's on Zoom? Anybody here? Anything that else that you'd like to share that we haven't talked about that wasn't, you certainly addressed all the questions that I had.
Um. No, I think, well, I've told friends, I had a good friends from Northwestern, a couple that, she was, the lady was sorority sister of my wife and, married a fellow called Chuck. And I said, you know, you two should, you know, do some traveling out of the country. And they had her mother living with them and said, well, we can't leave mother. And I said, wait a minute, you spend a vacation in southern Florida, and by the time you reach your destination in southern Florida, you could travel to Europe and be back again. And oh, we can't leave mother, but when mother goes, we're gonna travel. Well, by the time mother left this earth, Chuck was in a wheelchair, so they never traveled, so. I say, if you like to travel, travel.
Yes.
That's,
You learn a lot, yeah, that's good. I think travel can be extremely educational.
that's good advice, or is that an opinion? But anyway.
That's an opinion, I guess.
Phil,
Well,
thank
as someone who's lost his wife, rather sooner than I had expected, the time we spent traveling together was like the very best time. And so I always say to people, once you retire and have time to travel, make sure you do it because it's the best time together and you never know how much time you have. So I
Yeah,
totally agree with you on that one, Phil.
Thank you, yeah, no. Wonderful experiences and, when I think of some great travel experiences, I think, okay, who was that with?
Yeah, I
I
think-
know them all. No, but that's, yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Jonathan, yeah. Creates great memories.
Mm.
Well, Phil, thank you very much for sharing all these experiences and observations and excitement and sad times. Anyway, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.